Hi, everyone. I am Ryosuke Ushida, Deputy Director at FinTech Innovation Office of Japan Financial Services Agency, in charge of blockchain-related research. Thank you for joining this panel. I am joining this session from Washington, D.C., of the United States, where I am doing research on blockchain governance at Georgetown University. And then I will moderate this panel discussion on blockchain and digital identity, titled Potential and Challenges of Self-Sovereign Identity, SSI, and a Decentralized Identity or Identifier, DID, in financial use cases. So firstly, let me introduce our three distinguished speakers. First speaker is Kristina Yasuda, Kristina-san. She is the Identity Standard Architect at Microsoft Corporation. The second is Mashita, Masa-san, who is Senior Vice President of Strategic Innovations Department of JCB. The last but not least, of course, Naohiro Fujie, Naohiro-san. He is a board member of the OpenID Foundation Japan, as well as the General Manager at ITOCHU Techno Solutions. Thank you all for joining. And I think each of you could give a brief introduction of yourself when you speak first. But anyway, let's get down to the discussion. So I am wondering how many people audience have ever heard the word SSI or DID. And I guess not all of the audience are familiar with the concept of such a identity system and how it can be applied to the actual identity management in your business. But no worry about that. So today we have three experts in this domain to get you understand what SSI DID is and why does that matter for your future business. So firstly, let's start from a very basic question. So my first question to Kristina-san is what is SSI DID and how is that going to work, please?
Thank you, Ushida-san, and thank you everyone for joining the session. Well, it is a very hard question, the definitions, and especially the SSI, self-sovereign identity. I feel like different people have different take. So I would present a general definition and please take it as a general definition. So overall, it's the idea of putting individuals at the center of online interactions and transactions and giving individuals the power to create, manage, and destroy their identities. And one caveat here is it's not about self-issuance of the identity, well, at least in the context we're discussing today. It's not about me claiming I'm 50 years old, even though I'm 30, for example. But it's more about how do we manage the overall identity, which is part of a set of our credentials. And another thing is, from my perspective, it's a very important concept, not just in terms of privacy and security, but also in terms of our happiness of our digital interactions. Because in a digital world now, we feel like there's a lot more room for improving our transactions because now we don't have the freedom of expressing our digital selves like freely as we can in a physical self. And so that's about SSI, right? And SSIs are different means of realizing self-sovereign identity, and DIDs, also known as decentralized identifiers, are one of the means to do that. So decentralized identifiers is a very specific set of technologies being standardized at W3C, and it's essentially the identifiers that users can issue and manage themselves without the intermediaries, without the reliance on the intermediaries. And here, one important thing to understand is the difference between identifiers and identity, right? Identifiers is something that distinguishes us from other people. So one of my identifiers could be my name, Kristina. It's not, Miki or Mika, it's Kristina. You know how to distinguish me from other people. And then to Kristina, you start tying different attributes, different credentials, different claims, and that constitute my identity. And decentralized identifiers is that identifier Kristina that could be issued and managed in a decentralized manner. So I hope this sets a stage. Ushida-san, does that work?
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great explanation. So my understanding is that the SSI or DID-based identity systems enables individual users to control over their identity or personal information. That is maybe great for privacy protection perspective and the other perspective. Thank you. So I think next question is to Naohiro-san, Fujie-san. So I would like to ask you, so what is the actual difference between conventional, traditional identity management system and DID, SSI-based system? And then a relevant question is, this session is about blockchain and identity. So SSI DID is often associated with the concept of blockchain or public blockchain, but how does that relate?
Yeah, it's very good question because in this context of blockchain, often people consider SSI or DID in the combination of the blockchain. But I think SSI or DID itself not have any relationship between the blockchain itself. And what we want to achieve with SSI, self-sovereign identity, is to make users free from dependency on specific identity providers such as Google or Facebook. And we call it self-sovereign identity. For example, please consider if the people use a service which can be logged in with a Facebook account, but if Facebook suspends their accounts on them, the user is no longer able to use the service anymore. In this architecture, as a conventional identity system, users' accounts are fully controlled and managed by Facebook, and I hope that their accounts should be free from the control of specific identity providers. And what blockchain or distributed ledger technology are able to solve this problem is to prevent control users' identity by specific identity providers. If user's identity can be managed on the public blockchain, it's difficult to change or suspend or delete them, it's by small number of parties, and the users can get sovereignty of their identity, at least about their own identifier itself.
Great. So my understanding is, so SSI or DID-based identity system does not need to rely on a single entity. That can be a kind of single point of failure, such as data breach or account ban. So that's an important concept for financial regulation as well. We try to avoid single point of failure for the sustainable provision of financial services and their financial stability. That's great. The next question is for Mashita-san. So I would like to hear the opinions from a business perspective. So this is, of course, FinTech festival. So especially from financial business point of view, what are the potential benefit of SSI, DID, and then, yeah, prize yours, please.
Hi, I work for JCB, which is one of the payment schemes like Visa and MasterCard. When we discuss the identity or digital identity, everybody think about centralized identity because it is easier to control, manage. But in the real world, what we are doing is we have card issuers or card issuing banks, which is like identity providers. And we also have merchants and acquirers. They are like relying party service providers. The model we are doing now is very similar to decentralized model, DID model. And self-sovereign identity and decentralized identity idea may bring the similar benefit to the business. It is difficult to maintain or to build the centralized platform type business model. If we can do it, that may be better. But in the real world, everything is so decentralized. To maintain that business, current business, this SSI, DID may be a solution, good solution. This is what I'm thinking.
Thanks so much. Thank you for the great scoping. So yeah, as a regulators, we also have to think about how decentralized solution like a DID can be applied to the financial systems. Great. And then I think the audience to some extent understand the rough concept of SSI and DID, but I think let's see the example of SSI DID use case to deep dive into this world. So all of speakers happen to be involved in one of the proof of concept POC project using DID for the kind of student ID, digitalized student ID at Keio University. So maybe Naohiro-san is a project manager, so could you please introduce the project, and then maybe Kristina-san could follow up on.
Okay. Could you please show the slides I provided before? Page 2, from page 2 is about Keio University's project. And as Ushida-san said, that I'm a project manager of the Keio University's POC project. And in this project, no slides?
I'm not sure. Maybe the.
Okay. Okay, I'll explain.
Should I? Maybe I have to. Let me see. Please go ahead. I will try.
Okay, no problem. As you know, the Keio University is one of the biggest university in Japan, and they are very positive to adopt blockchain technology and the identity system itself. And it's in this project, what we aim to achieve is there are two goals. The first one is find a way to prove identity in online manner. For example, today in most of Japanese university uses a paper-based graduate certificates, but we have to proceed to use the digital certificates. Oh, this one. After in this situation and the COVID-19 situation, especially, yes, this slide is better. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we have some consortium member to proceed this project. Of course, we involved Keio University and Keio University's blockchain research center, and we ITOCHU Second Solution is a system integrator and coordinate this project. And there are some other institutes like Japan Digital Design and JCB as well, and Nippon Telegraph and Telephone West and the Blockbase itself. And our goal is verify the certificate in online manner and issue the verified credential as certificates to the smartphone app. And the student can use the smartphone app as their identity documents, like a student card in the physical world. And as I mentioned, that one of our goals is proof of identity online, and the second goal is make the credential long-lived and make it used globally. Current use case quite simple. Using verified credential by authenticated by the university's identity provider, which Keio University are operating now, and present a BC to the website when users want to log into the application. Which scenario is something like that, the passwordless login scenario to the applications. And also, there are several scenarios which is similar to our current physical manner, which users shows digital identity card to the in person to the reception like that, and enter to room. And please go on the next slide. But in the future, we'd like to extend its scenario to use BCs as diploma to submit to the other universities or private companies when the students have to prove their identities. For example, it's good scenario for financial institutions that the student can prove he is belonging to the university, or he was graduated. He graduated to the university, in the KYC or CDD processes. And I'd like to show some demo on the next slide. Please click the play button. Yeah, this demo shows that Keio University students can get the discount ticket by presenting the student card in digitally. Yeah, like this. The first one, first of all, the student scan the QR code by the identity wallet application and get a discount ticket by proving he is he belongs to the university. Maybe I believe the DID or BC SSI scenario look like this project and this movie in future. So thank you, Fujie-san. This is overview of our POC project in Keio University.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. So I think it was a nice demo to see what we can do with kind of next generation student ID card using SSI DID. So next, maybe over to you, Masa-san. So could you tell us why JCB as a financial company, payment service provider, is joining this project? So Fujie-san mentioned about KYC for the payment, but what is your motivation as a financial service provider to explore potential to this kind of identity system in the future?
All right. In Japanese law or regulation, we cannot utilize student card or identity information from university for our KYC or AML process. Even though we cannot utilize legally, we may be that information from the university can strengthen the trust of the person. What we are doing is the digital identity can be key for the future world. So many identity providers can be in the market, but it's difficult to find the use cases, and it's difficult to build the relying party market. What we want to do is we want to develop the use cases of digital identity, and we want to expand the relying parties to consider the possibility or use cases. This is a good opportunity for us. That is the background of we joined this project.
Thank you so much. So yes, so financial industry is heavily regulated by a regulator like us, and then maybe it's good approach this kind of step-by-step approach, starting from student ID, and then maybe a regulator might need to think about our regulatory framework that could fit into this kind of decentralized identity solution. But anyway, thank you for the explanation. So next is maybe Kristina-san. So I understand Microsoft is providing a kind of DLT-based identity infrastructure for this project as a kind of platformer. So this POC must be an interesting opportunity to identify what you can do at this point in time, and what you need to do as a future tasks. So please share us your takeaways.
Thank you. So one of the building blocks of this project was verifiable credentials as a service, which is a service built by Microsoft, and we are still in private preview. And Microsoft has ION, which is a layer 2 overlay on top of Bitcoin blockchain, which allows you to write decentralized identifiers using DID method ION. And one of the parts of this project used that to write DIDs. But I want to highlight that that was not the only building piece or technology that has been used. we really appreciate the Keio POC project using, really focusing on interoperability, trying to build proprietary wallets. And it is very important because we are committed to open standards, and it is very different than simply building open source. When you build these open standards, you have to make sure that, for example, in the demo you just saw, you have to make sure that one card in the wallet can be used, not just relying parties supporting that particular wallet, but also other wallets, right? Or ideally, we want to have a world where you can transfer that ID card from one app to another, because essentially we want to move to the world that is not dependent on big providers like Facebook, Google, or maybe even Microsoft, right? We want to move away from that space, so interoperability is very important. And I think the take back for me as an identity standards architect who work with different standard bodies trying to standardize different aspects of identity. Well, DIDs are pretty much standardized, but there's still so much more left. So for example, how do you communicate what kind of credential do you want, or revocation of the credential when you don't want that credential to be valid anymore, or even a transportation layer, right? How can we use conventional OpenID Connect, for example? So, and that just showed us that we've come a great way, we've made a great progress, but there's still way to go forward. In terms of credential standards, data formats, UI UX, we've got a great feedback because in this model where we have users sort of ideally taking a bit more responsibility over the credentials they're sharing, what is the easy to use UI UX, for example, and project POCs like this are crucial in moving forward. So I think we learned what works, what doesn't work, what we need to improve, and that we really need to keep asking the good questions to keep answer and find solutions.
I see. So I understand you are making a good progress from this project, and maybe DID is maybe not a very super futuristic solution, but it's rather relatively close to actual implementation. And but as you mentioned, there are some challenges from technical perspectives as well as UI UX and operation and maybe kind of governance perspective. So we can talk about that later. But before that, let's talk about financial use cases more specifically. So maybe it's I would like to ask Masa-san or Fujie-san. You can be fine, but could you let us know what kind of financial businesses or use cases are appropriate for this kind of identity management? So just from my perspective, so let's say if you replace the existing identity management system, centralized management system of GCB, let's say, with the next generation DID-based system, so what will benefit your company as well as merchant users and then possibly regulators like us? So are there any disadvantage of that? So this kind of thing, please.
All right.
Any of you? Yeah, sure.
It's difficult for one entity to assure the security and the trust. We are very careful and we try to do everything to secure the trust. But sometimes bad stars are so smart and they may deceive us. But even though one entity can be deceived, it is difficult to deceive, say, 10 entities. Utilizing the DID SSI type of idea, we may build the collective intelligence. Such model can be a solution for the financial industry. And at the same time, that we need to be compliant with the GDPR. And self-sovereign identity can be a solution for such GDPR requirements. This is benefit for financial industries. But on the other hand, we have some challenges. As I touched, it is difficult, say, for now, the regulations does not fit such DID SSI concept. So we need to have new rules, regulations for new world.
Ushida-san,
I
can
see.
you please turn on the camera? We can't see you.
I didn't notice that.
We're missing
Thank
the
you for that.
moderator. Hi,
Sorry about
welcome
that.
back.
Great. So yeah, thank you, Mashita-san, Masa-san. And then yeah, I sympathize with your insight that from regulatory perspectives, the existing system does not fit for the decentralized identity system. So we basically we focus on the onboarding process KYC used government issued identity. So that is crucial, of course, for the financial crime prevention. But as you mentioned, kind of collective knowledge of each customer can be useful to enhance our ongoing due diligence and then to improve the quality of ML KYC compliance. So that's a great perspective. So that's great. So Fujie-san or Kristina-san, do you want to add something from this perspective? Maybe Fujie-san.
Yeah, as Master-san said, it's very difficult to prove or verify identity in by the single entity or a single organization. So the continuous due diligence or the collective information to prove the identity is very important. And this scenario is related to the, I think it's related to the financial inclusion itself, because some of the residents do not have any official identity documents, even in Japan. So it's one way to prove their identity using some various identity documents, not official one, to prove their identity to use financial services from service providers. It's a one use case for DID or SSI, I think.
That's great. So financial inclusion is a great use case for the SSI DID. And then Kristina-san has a lot of experiences on this agenda. So could you elaborate on how SSI DID can be used for financial inclusion, especially in emerging countries?
Thank you. So another hat I wear is I also work as Director of Digital Identities at an international NGO, internetbar.org, where we've spent several years looking into the ways how we can use DID SSI to exactly what Fujie-san just mentioned, empower people who cannot get access to different services, including financial services, because they lack of the means of proving who they are. Because, you know, if you want to get a bank account, they ask you, what's your ID? And I think we have several learnings. One way to approach this is to collaborate with the government, because again, if it's identity assurance, the government wants to connect the service to their databases. And Kiva, one of the initiatives, they're doing a project like that in Sierra Leone, for example. But I think we've been taking a little bit different bottom-up approach, where especially it's useful for populations like refugees, who where government do not really want to come into play necessarily. And that's where we understand that we may not be able to give the refugees the ability to open a bank account from the very beginning, but from our perspective, at least we want them to give this first step into this world where we can get access to. And that's where the ability of having your own decentralized identifiers being issued, being cryptographically secured, offered sort of a first grade building block how to get there. But I think I've been reading different reports, and I think what's emerging is a sort of conflict between yes, the technology has a great potential to empower refugees and different marginalized populations, even in developed countries like Japan or Singapore, give more privacy, ownership. But at the same time, are we building this system where the states can control better? And there are different aspects to consider. One is being technological neutrality, and that kind of speaks to the standards discussion we've had. And the second thing is the capability of those populations, including refugees. Do they know what the SSI really is, right? And third thing is really the governance and the state. How do you interact with the authorities, and how do you build up on that? And third is really the new economic models, new business models using identity, digital identity. So one hope is, refugees or marginal populations would be able to kind of provide their data and receive some probably even money in return, right? But how do we get there? What are the regulations we're facing there too? So, the more we dig into, there are more questions we have to consider. And again, how do we solve these issues while empowering these populations is our learning.
I see. Thank you so much. So obviously there are some a variety of society goals, like from regulators' perspective, it's financial crime prevention, and then but from individual perspective, data sovereignty, privacy protection, or censorship resistance against a bad government is also important. And then from business perspective, maybe better customer information management is essential for the sustainable business operation. So I think we have less than 15 minutes left. So let's talk about the future roadmap of this ecosystem. So obviously, we already have discussed some potentials as well as challenges of this identity system. But maybe I wanna ask also each of you from technology perspective, it's a kind of standard or interoperability perspective, and then as well as a business perspective. So let's start from the technological issues. So Kristina-san already touched upon some issues, but maybe Fujie-san and Kristina-san again contributing to the kind of standardization effort by with its OpenID Foundation or Microsoft, and then as a organization like a DIF. So from that perspective, what are the technological challenges that we have to address in the future?
Okay, actually I'm co-chair of OpenID Foundation's eKYC and Identity Assurance Working Group, which is focusing on eKYC and identity assurance itself. And in my opinion, it's very difficult to adopt of the DID or VC to all of existing systems. And so I think it's interoperability or coexistence of the current existing technology and VC or DIDs are quite important for now. For example, there are many standards, technical specifications around OpenID, such as financial grade API called FAPI or OpenID Connect for identity assurance. And some of the identity providers, such as mobile operators, which supports current standard spec, and which and also the mobile operator now they have their own KYC process to onboarding the customers to their databases, and it's one way they provide their own customers' data to the financial institutions via OpenID connects identity assurance protocol and so on. And some of financial institutions will receive the identifiers or identities to help their own KYC process much easier or faster. And also the financial institution now supports financial grade API to provide data or capability to customers to the financial services or like FinTech services and so on. And by combining the DID or VC to the current technical specification like OpenID, some of the service provider will be happy to get a customer's identity much easier and faster that they are currently using these ID specs. For example, the payment service completely relying their KYC process to banks, for example. But using BC, they can get additional information from users in verified ways, and users get current status of users on the verifiable credential, and they can verify their identity status and right now. So the provider can able to provide a new service or good services to the customers. I think it's quite interesting work, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, in my humble understanding, so in the past, so each financial institution, like a bank, are managing their identity or customer information by themselves. But now it's a more complicated ecosystem where financial institutions and the third party are working together to secure the assurance level of identity management system as a whole. So maybe from operation governance and then maybe regulatory perspective, we have to make sure that each are functioning very well to ensure the necessary level of assurance that can be fit for the financial use case. Thank you so much.
If I may add, I've been increasingly involved with the Connect working group at Open Identity Foundation, and I also serve as a liaison officer between Open Identity Foundation and Decentralized Identity Foundation, where the main efforts of standardization around decentralized identity have been happening. And this is incredible. This could be a big path towards adoption, because OpenID Connect is what's behind how we log in the internet. Like, we use it every day. There are billions of people in the world using it. Login with Facebook is built using OpenID Connect. And the thing is, right now, you cannot use DIDs or VCs to log in, using OpenID Connect. And just a quick clarification, so VC stands for verifiable credentials. So it's a credential format where you put the information about the user that is, cryptographically you can verify whether that information is correct or not. And so if we can come up with ways to use these new technologies and bridge it to existing protocol that has already been adopted, that could be very powerful. And again, we have to see how verifiable credentials can be used, how DIDs can be used, because now we're not depending on big identity providers, how we can have an external credential issuer issue it to you. I'm getting in technical nitty-gritties, but you get the idea. Like, we're trying to build that bridge, and that could be also has great synergies with the verified credentials work Naohiro-san just explained in the eKYC working group. And I believe we have to connect with the work happening IDA KYC work as well.
IT, thanks so much. Okay, let me ask an additional question from the interoperability perspective. So I'm not sure at all, but maybe many organization or company are working in this space, but how they are working together. So my question is, are they working together basically, or how they try to ensure the interoperability among systems, maybe technology or operation layer, whichever. So does any of you answer this question?
Yeah, technology interoperability is quite important, but the data schema interoperability is more important for them, because even based on the VC or DID, the data format is not the same. If the data format is not the same, they cannot exchange data or information each other. So it's quite important to collaborate to define the data format.
I see. Thank you. And then I wonder, Masa-san could add something from business or policy-making perspective.
Oh, yes.
And I wonder, I wonder, are there any kind of business incentives for financial institutions to adapt? Maybe it may be a difficult question, but including this kind of topic. please.
Oh, thank you very much. Incentive, very difficult question. I want to say there are two big missing pieces. One is use cases, and the other is business model itself. We don't know who will pay for identity information and how much will it be. That part nobody knows. And as I touched, the regulators' support or push is very important to build the digital identity DID SSI world. But I understand it's difficult for regulators to create new regulation without any use cases or business model. So what we need to do now is to try. We need to try many types of the use cases, and we need to find the business model.
I see. Thanks so much. So I think that a kind of multi-stakeholder cooperation is needed, especially in this space of regulator kind of lack the capability or ability from the technical perspective, and then maybe but we can provide some regulatory implications for the actual use cases. So this kind of thing is, I guess, important. So we have only 3 minutes left. So I would like to ask you your final few words from each of the speakers. So anyone can go first, but maybe Kristina-san, could you go first?
Final words, that's very hard. In terms of use cases, I feel like I thought that initially, because financial industry has so many regulations, that would be kind of a future use case. But trying to, after doing a POC in the education space and working especially, with JCB and Mashita-san, it, becomes clear that credentials being issued in education space or, medical space, ultimately, inevitably gets connected to the fintech space, right? So I really, if you're thinking of doing a POC, whether it's supply chain or trade finance, involve financial actors, involve them, because that will give more reality to your use case and POC, and that would help move standards and regulations forward a lot.
Thanks so much. So next is maybe Fujie-san.
Yeah, it's quite interesting scenario for me because I'm a tech person. But for use case, this scenario is a typical chicken and egg problem because there's no issuer of a DID or VC currently, and also there's no verifiers which can receive DID as an identity proofing. So it's very important to make multiple use cases in multiple industry through the POC project to create much use cases and exchange these information each other.
Yeah,
Thank you.
If I may add before Mashita-san, closes off, I think another point is the governance. Don't forget the governance aspect. We discussed technology a lot today, but in the end, even talking to World Economic Forum people, they say governance are going to decide a lot of it, and especially if you're relying on blockchains, which do have different governance models, on-chain, off-chain, permissioned, non-permissioned, consortiums, public chains. And setting this off, I think eventually, hopefully, that would lead to the business model discussion as well. Who controls, who makes the decision making? Because if you start using the system for business, inevitably the question arises: can we rely on it? Can we, assure our customers that the system will continue working and they can, build business using our wallets or whatever we're providing? So yeah, the governance is just is always the elephant in the room. Sorry, Mashita-san, your turn.
Agreed. So Masa-san, please.
All right. What I want to say is the relying party and the use cases. That is very important piece. And coming back to the Kristina's comment, what will be the scheme for identity? It is also important. We need to manage rule on the scheme, and we need to manage the risks among the players, identity providers, as well as the relying parties. That part is very important, I believe. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you very much for speakers for joining, and then thank you audience for listening. I hope you get something out of today's exciting discussion. So this is the end of the session. All right. So the next session is a keynote speech by Hideki Ito. He's a Vice Commissioner at the Financial Services Agency of Japan. He's in charge of policy making, digital, and fintech strategy. So it will start in a few minutes at 2:10 p.m. Japan time. So please stay tuned. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.